All right, great. Well, welcome everybody. Today we're going to be doing Nutrition 101. I think all of you know me. I'm Raina Franco, the Ogilvy registered dietitian, and I'm available for one-on-one counseling. And all you need to do is send me an email and we'll make an appointment. So if you have, in any way, if you have any questions about anything we talk about, we could bring it up now, or you could send me an email. So, or on any topic at all, just feel free to email me and I will answer your questions. So Nutrition 101, there we go. So basically, we're going to talk about the basics of nutrition. People talk about carbohydrates, proteins, fats. Well, what are they? I'm going to explain what they are and what they do for our body. We're going to also talk about reading the food label. So that will teach us how to make healthy choices. And then we're going to talk about portion sizes. So not only do we have to learn, what is our food comprised of and how to read the labels, but what's a realistic portion size to eat. So the first thing we're going to cover are our macronutrients, and that's what we call carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Those are our macronutrients. Micronutrients are our vitamins and minerals. Today we're just going to be talk about the macronutrients. And if you're interested in micronutrients, just tell me and I could do another presentation just on vitamins and minerals. But I think you really need to know about the macronutrients first. And then we could talk about the basics of the micronutrients. So the first item we're going to talk about is carbohydrates. Everybody's talking about carbs all the time. Years ago, it's like the Atkins diet, low carb, and then high carb, and now it's keto diet, and there's the paleo diet, all these different diets, which quite often just focus on how much carbs we're eating. And many of them are reducing the carbs. Let's talk about what is a carbohydrate in the first place. So here you see, this is what a carbohydrate looks like. This is the chemical structure of a carbohydrate. So they're also called saccharides, and they are a sugar or also a starch. So that's not a bad thing. It's used as energy. So this sugar is in our body, but it's not a bad sugar. Our body needs it. It needs to process. We need that sugar for our brain health, for our muscles, for everything to process. These sugars are made up of carbons and hydrogen and oxygen atoms, as you see in this structure here. If you go back to your chemistry, that's what it looks like. And you hear the word ketones a lot. So ketones are double bonded carbon-oxygen atoms. So that creates a ketone. And we're not going to really talk about ketone diets, but that's where that terminology comes from. It actually comes from a carbohydrate. So let's break our carbs down even more. We have simple carbohydrates and complex carbohydrates. So in terms of chemistry, a simple carbohydrate is one that consists of only one or two molecules. So if it's one molecule, it's going to be a monosaccharide. If it's two molecules, it's a disaccharide. And these provide a rapid source of energy. So examples would be white bread, any added sugar, honey, candy, molasses, maple syrup. So when you consume those things, they immediately give you energy real quickly. Then there are complex carbohydrates, and these are called polysaccharides. And the reason why it's poly, it means long chains, a lot of sugar molecules chained together. And you find complex carbs in whole grains and foods that still have their fiber. Now, since the fiber's in there, it has more vitamins and minerals than your simple carbs. And examples of these are fruits, vegetables, pulses, which are your beans and legumes, brown rice, and whole grain pasta. And fiber itself is a complex carbohydrate. Now here's a little bit more on fiber. So this is a really easy, simple picture of explains the fiber. A whole grain has the bran, the endosperm, and the germ. So the bran is that outer layer which holds the B vitamins and minerals. The middle part, the endosperm, contains that starchy carbohydrate, and it has some proteins and vitamins. And then you have the germ. The germ is filled with B vitamins, vitamin E, phytochemicals. Phytochemicals means plant-based chemicals. Those are good chemicals, and healthy fats. Now, when you make something like white bread or white rice, what they do is they strip away the bran and they strip out the germ and they leave the endosperm. So all that's left is you got rid of all that fiber, you got rid of the B vitamins, the E, most of the phytochemicals, and most of those healthy fats, and all you're left is with starchy carbohydrate. So that is why it's recommended that we consume whole grain foods, because it gives that fiber, it gives those vitamins, instead of the processed white foods. Now, I mentioned before about the energy that carbohydrates provide us. So carbs are our body's main source of fuel. And so what happens when we consume carbohydrates during digestion, part of that whole digestive process, those sugars and starches in the carbohydrates are then broken down into simple sugars. Now, that's not bad, because we need those simple sugars for the energy. They're absorbed into our bloodstream, and then they're turned into what's called glucose, blood glucose, or blood sugar. And that's a very normal process. Now, from there, what happens is we have insulin, which is a hormone in our body. And what it does, insulin takes that glucose and it puts it into our cells to be used for energy and fuel our activities. So think of it as you have a football, and your football is the blood sugar, and you make a pass and you catch it. The catcher is insulin, and then the insulin and the glucose go together, and you make a touchdown. And that's when you get your energy. Now, if you have extra glucose, it's then stored in our liver and muscles and also other cells for later use. Or if you have too much of it, that is when it gets converted to fat. So when you eat food with carbohydrates, it doesn't mean you're going to be eating fat or it turns into fat. The excess, like anything else, excess carbohydrate, excess protein, excess fat is what will be converted into stored fat. Now, carbs are also important for disease prevention. So there's a lot of science out there that shows that whole grains and specifically the dietary fiber may reduce your risk of cardiovascular disease. Fiber may also protect against obesity and type 2 diabetes. And it's also important for our digestive system. So fiber makes us feel more full, and that might be one reason why it will protect us against obesity. So maybe we'll eat a little bit less. Fiber is important for our body to digest our food. They go through our system properly to have, proper bowel movements and so on. And there's lots of important nutrients in the fiber that will help with our cardiovascular system. And that comes to where the carbohydrates contain phytonutrients. So phyto, when you ever see that word, means plant. So phytonutrients are nutrients from plants that are essential for our metabolism, immunity, and detoxification. And I just did 2 recent presentations on immunity and detoxification. And I think some of you were there and you heard about the different types of carbohydrates that are protective. And I will be doing another presentation on metabolism. So that's going to be coming up in June. So keep your eyes open for that. So carbohydrates are important for us. But there are different types of carbohydrates out there. So the best types of carbohydrates are the ones that are naturally occurring, the ones you get from plants, whole foods. That's your nuts, vegetables, fruits, grains, seeds, legumes, and beans. These are the ones that are super high in fiber, high in phytonutrients, will give you lots of energy, provide you with the minerals and vitamins that you need to be healthy. It goes without saying, the negative carbs are the ones that are the processed foods. Any questions on carbohydrates before we move on to protein?
Raina,
Sure.
are carbs, are those bars, you know, like Kind bars, are those carbs?
So those have, I would say, probably more fat in them than carbs. So the kind, it also depends on which ones you choose. So some of them are better than others.
All right, thank
You'd have to read the food label, which we'll be talking about next. So you'll, after this presentation, you can take a look at the food label and figure out which is higher in carbs and higher in fat, and what might be the best choice for you. Any other questions? Feel free to go off mute if you have any questions. All right. So I'm going to now move on to protein. All right. So what is protein? So protein we find everywhere in our body. So you have it in muscle and bone and skin and hair. Every part of our body has some protein. It makes up the enzymes that power many chemical reactions, and also the hemoglobin that carries oxygen in your blood. So protein is made up of more than 20 building blocks that are called amino acids. Now there are 9 essential amino acids. Now the reason why they're called essential is because the only way we could get them is from the food we consume. And those 9 essential amino acids are histidine, isoleucine, leucine, lysine, methionine, phenylalanine, threonine, tryptophan, and valine. Now, all the others, the remaining 11 plus, our body can make on its own. And protein is really important. What protein does is it transports molecules throughout the body. It helps repair cells and makes new ones. It protects the body from viruses and bacteria. And it promotes proper growth and development in children, teenagers, and pregnant women. And there's a lot of other things that protein does for our body besides this. These are just like four big points. And we have a couple sources of protein. You can get them from animal products, like meat, poultry, dairy, eggs, fish. And there's also plant-based proteins, which you get protein from grains and legumes, from beans, nuts, seeds, and vegetables. So it is possible to get sufficient protein from plants. Not necessarily, you don't need to get the protein from animals. Now, many of us have heard of complete proteins. A complete protein is a protein that contains all of those essential amino acids. Now, let's say you don't eat meat. Well, first of all, I would say all meat proteins, all animal proteins are complete. Not all plant-based proteins are complete. So the ones that are complete include quinoa, buckwheat, hemp seed, blue gene algae, and soybeans. Let's say you have something else like black beans, which is not a complete protein. If you pair that with some brown rice, there you have a complete protein right there. But you don't have to have that in the same exact meal. You could have maybe the black beans at lunch and the brown rice at dinner time, and it will all come together at the end of the day. So it's not necessary to pair those foods in every meal, which is something many years ago we were told that we had to do that, but science has found that it's not necessary. Now, here we have different protein choices. We have a steak, a ham, salmon, and lentils. So if we compare the four, you will see that a 4-ounce broiled sirloin steak has 33 grams of protein, which is a nice amount of protein. But it has 5 grams of saturated fat. Saturated fat is that bad fat that increases our low density lipoproteins. That's our bad cholesterol. So we want to try to stay away from saturated fat. And 5 grams is a lot. Now we'll compare this to a similar size, 4 ounces of ham steak. It's a little bit lower in protein, 22 grams, which is still a good amount of protein. And it is lower in saturated fat, 1.6 grams. However, it has 1,500 milligrams of sodium, which is super high. If you don't have high blood pressure or high cholesterol or diabetes, our limits are about 2,400 milligrams of sodium. So this is more than half the sodium for the day. When someone has high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, we try to get it down to 1,500 milligrams a day. Well, right here, about 1,500 milligrams of sodium. So this is not a great choice. Now we'll compare it with a similar amount of fish, grilled sockeye salmon, which has 30 grams of protein. Again, a good source of protein. It's low in sodium and has about a little bit more than a gram of saturated fat. So these salmon and other fatty fish are really healthy for us because they have the omega-3 fatty acids, which is good for the heart, good for inflammation. So that's a better option than the ham or the steak. And then we come down to lentils, 1 cup. So that has about 18 grams of protein. So it's a good source of protein. 15 grams of fiber, which none of the other protein sources have. And it has pretty much no saturated fat and no sodium. So if we look at these 4 choices, which one do you think is the best choice? Good. If you like, you can put that in the chat box or you can say something.
The lentils.
Yes. Lentils would be the healthiest choice. They're just.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. You had a question?
Raina, what about baked chicken?
So chicken would be somewhere probably between, it's a great source of protein. So it's around the same amount of protein as the ham, maybe a little more. Without the skin, it's probably similar in fat as the ham, maybe a little bit higher. And as long as you're not adding any sodium to it, it should be pretty low in sodium. The problem with chicken is the skin. So you want to avoid the skin because that's loaded with saturated fat. That's all it is.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions about protein before we move on to fat?
Raina, I was wondering what your thoughts are on like deli meats.
Okay, deli meats are extremely high in sodium. And quite often they're heavily processed and they have a lot of chemicals in them. So I generally don't recommend them. There are some companies that will make deli meats that are lower, have less chemicals, but you still have to check the sodium content. So if you are being mindful about the amount of sodium you're consuming, you'll have to check the food label and see how much sodium is in the product.
And Raina, isn't the problem with chicken actually that it's quite high in cholesterol?
It's the skin part that's high in cholesterol for the chicken.
Okay.
Yeah. Great questions. Any others? All right, we'll move on to fat. All right, so fat does not make us fat. So we do need fat. Fat is really important for us. It's another source of energy. It supports cell growth. It protects our organs. It helps our body absorb nutrients. And that's really an important point because there's some vitamins that are fat soluble. It's vitamin A, D, E, and K. So in order for our body to absorb those nutrients, it needs fat. And fat also produces very important hormones. So we need fat. It's just all about the type of fat that we consume. And we have several different types of fats. You have your saturated fats. And if you see the picture here, getting into our chemistry, there's no bond there, so it's saturated. Then we have unsaturated fats. So there's the monounsaturated fat, which has one bond, mono. And there's polyunsaturated fats, which has more than one bond. And then we have trans fats. And we'll get to the explanation of what all these mean in greater detail, but you could go back to your friends and family now and tell them what these different fats really are and, give them a little chemistry lesson. So we'll start with saturated fats. Saturated fats are solid at room temperature. When we consume saturated fats, what they do is they increase our low density lipoproteins. That's our bad cholesterols. So if your LDLs are high, what you want to do is you want to reduce your saturated fat intake. So you'll find that, a food, let's give, like chicken, we'll talk about, will have different proportions of saturated fat and unsaturated fats. So if you compare chicken and steak, the steak is going to have a greater proportion of saturated fat compared to the chicken. And when you compare the fish to the chicken, same thing, chicken's going to have greater saturated fat than the fish. And then when we talk about the lentils will have the lowest amount of saturated fat. So the proportion of those things will vary with the different foods. So high saturated fat foods include fatty cuts of meat, bacon, butter, whole milk dairy, coconut oil, and so on. Then we have our unsaturated fats. So those are liquid at room temperature. You find those in plants. And those are our good fats. So they will increase our high density lipoproteins, our HDLs, which is considered our good cholesterol. So we need those foods. We actually need it for our heart. And then we have the trans fats. These are evil. They're evil because not only do they raise our LDL cholesterol, our low density lipoproteins, but they also reduce our HDL cholesterol, our good cholesterol. So we want to stay away from trans fats. Trans fats have been shown to increase the risk of heart disease. We find them naturally occurring in some animal products like milk, butter, cheese, and meat. But what you have to really look for is on the food label, something that says hydrogenated or partially hydrogenated oil. So this is when the manufacturing process uses hydrogen and they add it to the vegetable oil. And it turns liquid fat into a more stable solid. So that's what we're going to be looking for in our ingredient list. So if you ever see that, either the words hydrogenated or partially hydrogenated, don't consume that product. We find it mostly in fried foods, margarine, vegetable shortening, baked goods, and processed snack foods. So what fats can we enjoy? So you're going to find good sources of fat in nuts and seeds, vegetable oils like canola, olive oil, flaxseed oil, soybean oil, corn, avocado, sunflower, and safflower oil. Avocados are great. So enjoy these foods. They're all really healthy for you. And they're good for your brain, they're good for your heart, and they will give you some energy. Now, a question that people always ask me is like, well, how much of this should I eat? Well, it's going to vary for everybody on this, you're watching this right now. Everybody right now has different calories, needs different amounts of protein, carbs, and fat. Our goals are going to be different. Some people might want to gain weight, some might want to lose weight, some might want to maintain weight. Our activity levels are different. Some people are sedentary, some are very active. Our ages are different. So a younger person might need more calories than an older person whose metabolism has gone down. And then medical issues. If a person has kidney disease, they're going to need less protein than a healthy person. If a person has diabetes, they're going to probably want less carbs than someone else. But in general, these are approximate percentages that we will generally be eating. That's a healthy meal. Healthy way of eating is anywhere between 50 to 60% carbohydrate, 15 to 20% protein, and 25 to 30% fat. And this also could vary. Some people might be doing a lower carb diet where they're having 40% carbs, or maybe a high fat diet where it's 35% fat. So for, again, everybody, it's going to be different. And this is something that I work on individually with people to determine what is the right ratio for them. Then the big question is, okay, what's a calorie? So we talk about, well, I need, let's say I need 1,800 calories. That person needs 2,400 calories. A calorie is unit of energy. And it was actually defined in 1863. It was defined as the amount of heat needed to raise the temperature of 1 kilogram of water from 0 degrees Celsius to 1 degree Celsius. And like I mentioned, everybody has different caloric needs. And this is based on your general health, your physical activity, your gender, how much you weigh, your height, your body shape, your age, if you're pregnant or breastfeeding. So again, everybody needs different calories. And obviously we get our calories from food. So if you look at 1 gram of carbs and 1 gram of fat, that's equal to 4 calories. But 1 gram of carbs, 1 gram of protein. Sorry about that. 1 gram of carbs, 1 gram of protein is 4 calories. But 1 gram of fat is 9 calories. So when we start talking about calories in food, something that is proportionally more fat is going to give you a lot more calories than something that's proportionally more carbs or protein. That would be less calories. Any questions about calories at all? What it means, proteins, carbs, fat, before we move on to reading the nutrition label? All right, so we're going to move on. Nutrition facts label. I'm sure everybody's seen this. Anytime you have a processed product, this is the label you see. And next year, they're actually going to be making some good adjustments to this label. And this one here actually has one of the adjustments. So they're going to be adding, it's going to be a requirement to have added sugars on the label. But I'm going to just talk about the way the label looks now. So the first thing we have is a serving size. And it tells us there are 4 servings in this container. And a serving size is 1 cup. So if I decide to eat the entire thing, I'm eating 4 servings. And 1 serving is 280 calories. So if I eat this entire, whatever product this is, it's 280 times 4. So what's that? Over 1,000 calories. So great. That's a lot of calories. So you really need to know that whenever you buy, let's say, a bag of chips, if it's a big bag of chips and you eat the entire thing, think about how many calories you actually consumed. You can figure that out by the label. The next thing we have is the nutrients. They include fat, cholesterol, sodium. So this product here has 9 grams of fat, which is pretty significant. And you can tell that by the percentage of daily value. So just memorize this. If you see 5% or less, it's low. 20% or greater, it's high. So total fat is 12%, so that's high. And then saturated fat, 23%, it's super high. Cholesterol is 35 milligrams. Not bad. Again, that's between 5% and 20%. I should go back to total grams of fat. It's not considered high, but when I saw a saturated fat, and that jumped right at me. Trans fat, we see here on the label, it's 0. However, what you need to look for, even though the trans fats here says 0, you have to read the ingredient list. They're allowed to have trans fats in a product if it's less than 0.5 grams, and they can list it as 0 if they want. So look for that hydrogenated word in your ingredient list. Sodium is 850 grams, super high. Another trick is if your sodium is greater than the calories, it's too high. Carbohydrates, 34 grams, that's fine. 4 grams of fiber, okay. 6 grams of total sugars, and no added sugar. So that, I'm glad to see there's no added sugar here. 15 grams of protein, which is considered a good source of protein. And then we list vitamin D, calcium, iron, and potassium. So it's 25% of the percentage daily value of calcium, which is actually very good. So whatever product this is, it's a good source of calcium. So looking at this entire label, do you think this would be a healthy product, or should we not purchase this? What do you could use a chat box, or you could say something.
I think not.
Okay, and why?
Because of the fat content and the sodium.
Yes, exactly. So although there are some good things about this product, like calcium is good and protein is good, the fat, there's too much saturated fat and too much sodium. Exactly. And that's where reading the nutrition facts label is really important, and learning how to decipher what's good and what's not good. Any questions on this? All right. So next one is the ingredient list. So I always suggest, even before we get to the nutrition facts, the very first thing I do is I read the ingredient list. I don't ignore it. I look at that second, but first I take a look at the ingredients, because I like to know what's in my product. And the ingredients are listed in descending order by weight. So if you look at this particular product here, it has a lot of ingredients. The healthier the food, the fewer the ingredients. And if you don't know what something is, it probably isn't good for you. So the very first thing here I see is enriched wheat flour. So what that means to me is that it's processed. It's processed wheat. They removed the outer layer of the wheat. So it's not whole wheat. In order for this to be a whole grain product, it has to have that word whole, W-H-O-L-E. When it says enriched, it means they added back in the vitamins and minerals that the product was stripped of. And then as we go along, it's enriched flour, water, vegetable shortening. Another key here, partially hydrogenated soybean and cottonseed oil. So it's telling me it has trans fat, which they do list on the nutrition facts label of this product, which I see as a croissant. 1.5 grams of trans fat, that is terribly high. It contains butter, sugar, and a whole bunch of other products. Like, what is sodium aluminum phosphate? What is that used for? Dough conditioner. Why have that? And this one here, azodicarbonamide, ADA. So there's a lot of ingredients in this product, and a lot that I have no idea what they are. And it does list artificial flavor and preservatives. So again, this, just by looking at the ingredient list, I can say, I'm not going to buy this product. I didn't even have to look at the nutrition facts label to make that determination. Any question about the ingredient list? All right. So next one is portion sizes. This is not terribly, I'm having, oh, my screen, I'm having a problem reading it. I hope you are not. But this gives an idea of serving sizes of food that's cooked and uncooked, which I think is great because that's always a big question. Like, for example, the fish, uncooked is 6 to 7 ounces. It gets cooked down to 3 to 4 ounces. But then it also tells you, what a size is. So about 3 ounces of cooked fish is about the size of a checkbook. And then meat, you have 4 ounces, goes down to 3 ounces. And that's about the size of a mouse. So these are your basic portion sizes. When it comes to pasta and rice and other grains, it's a half cup cupped, which is half a baseball. Or I also just like the palm of your hand, like if you could just get a handful of it. Beans and lentils and pulses are about a half cup cupped and same size. And so this is a great way to figure out what a portion size would be. Again, based on what your needs are, your protein, your carbs, your fats, your calories, you might have 1 portion, you might have 2 portions. Again, it's all about your own needs. Any questions on portion sizes? All right. So what questions do you have? Feel free to unmute yourself and say something or type something in the chat window.
Raina, I was wondering about dates. Is that a good source of a good fat?
So there's really no fat in dates. It's mostly a carbohydrate.
Okay.
And if it's dried, it's going to have a little bit, more, you probably end up eating more of those, so there's more sugar, but the dates are fine.
Okay.
It's pretty much just a carbohydrate. It's a whole grain, it's a whole food.
Oh, thanks.
Any other questions? Any suggestions of what other types of presentations you'd like to see? I'm going to be giving a few more in June, one about metabolism, one on brain food, and one about breaking sugar addictions.
Oh, those sound great.
Oh, good. Yeah, then they came from, I made a decision based on the survey I put out last month about what people wanted to hear or see. So those were the winners. And this was a winner. So that's why we had this one today. All right. Well,
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
I think
you.
everybody stay safe. If you do have any questions, you know where to find me. Send me an email, and I will be sending this out to everybody. Feel free to share it with other people, and it's also going to be posted on the Fitness Center website if you want to take a look at it there. All right. So have a great day, everyone.
You
You-
too.
You
All
too.
right.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.